Under President Xi's rule, the Chinese Communist Party is heading even faster and further in the wrong direction. More internal repression, more predatory economic practices, more heavy-handedness, and most concerning for me, a more aggressive military posture. It is essential that we, as an international community, wake up to the challenges presented by China's manipulation of the long-standing international rules-based order that has benefited all of us for many decades.
Covering the conference for us from Munich is Jonah.
Well, the world's two most powerful nations squared off against one another here in Munich. First, the United States, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark Esper giving notice, firing the starting gun essentially on what could be a new era of US defense and foreign policy. China as enemy number one, the Pentagon's top priority, said Mark Esper, because of its more aggressive military posturing in the region, its trade, economic and territorial ambitions further afield. He said, we do not want conflict with China. We want China to play by the rules, abide by international norms. In short, we want China to behave, and making the point in no uncertain terms that the US expects its allies to view things likewise, noting in particular Chinese telecom giant Huawei, some European allies, the UK in particular, in talks with Huawei to help build their 5G networks. Well, the US, of course, sees Huawei as a Trojan horse for Chinese intelligence. Well, it wasn't long before China had the opportunity here to respond. Wang Yi, the foreign minister, saying China will not follow the Western model and seek hegemony in the world, but rather choose a policy of peaceful development, working for shared prosperity. And he had this very pointed response to those US comments.
Before I came here, my colleagues told me about what the two American senior officials said, and they have been once again repeating their smears and criticism of China. It has become a common scenario. They basically say the same thing wherever they go about China, and I don't want to waste our time responding to each and everything they've said. What I want to say is that all of these accusations against China are lies. They are not based on facts.
So China emerging here, presenting itself certainly as an unlikely standard bearer for multilateralism, the very policy plank and pillar upon which Western diplomacy has been built and practiced for decades, and the very thing that many here and elsewhere would say that the Trump administration has abandoned.
So here's Marwan Bishara, our Senior Political Analyst in London, to talk through some of this. Marwan, the fact that Mark Esper said this in Munich. Jonah described it earlier as a platform, really, for people to say what they want, but he says it in Munich, in Europe. There's a very specific audience here, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think the statements should not be read, seen, or understood outside this context, that this is directed to Europe, not even to China per se, or to the US public, to the American public, because there's nothing that we've heard new from the Trump administration about what sort of a strategy are they envisioning, a new strategy to deal with China, because we all know that they've abandoned the strategy of the previous president, President Obama's pivot to Asia, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was abandoned by the Trump administration, two strategies that were meant to contain China militarily and economically. So what we hear here today is basically also similar to what we heard from the Obama administration, that China, while it should be underwriting the international order with the United States, has been undermining it. And that's why the Trump administration is upping the ante. But where and who? Well, it's towards Europe, because it wants Europe to get with the program and get behind the United States. And when it comes to Huawei or when it comes to anything else, the United States feels that Europe must support the United States. But what we've heard from other speakers, like President Macron and the German president, is that there's a sense in Europe that the United States, or rather the Trump administration, has been taking it for a ride, been taking advantage of it, and that Europe needs to speak more united, independently of the United States, including on question of China and whether or not to incorporate Huawei in its technology or artificial intelligence or what have you. So we have a bit of nuance, a bit of I would say, disagreement between Europe and the United States on this issue.